This is huge. 10.2.6 is very close, and Season 4 has kind of been already announced with all of the dungeon changes, not to mention a pretty massive overhaul of the entire dungeon scene, and not Mythic Plus, by the way, heroic dungeons, Mythic 0, and of course the Mythic Plus as well. Big eye level changes announced in terms of how high we can climb with our gear soon, and it all comes off the back of a super suspiciously long maintenance for this reset. Let's kick it off. First of all, we know for sure that 10.2.6 is not going to be announced because they want to keep it a secret. But listen, there's gonna be content in 10.2.6, obviously, and they cannot put content in the game without patching, obviously. And now we have a patch and a super long maintenance, which, I mean, if this doesn't mean 10.2.6, I don't know what will mean 10.2.6. However, a bigger indication is that Season 4 is close. Now, we can kind of guess that Season 4 is not going to come with 10.2.6 because of a bunch of reasons that we iterated before. First of all, they can keep 10.2.6 as a secret if they want to with all the activities and probably whatever's coming in 10.2.6. But they cannot keep Season 4 a secret because that needs to be tested. The dungeon pool needs to be tested. The affixes need to be tested because otherwise they won't be balanced. And we already have issues with unbalanced dungeons at the start of a season where you just don't do that one key because god damn it, that boss just kills you at any point in time at any key level. So we know that that's going to hit in the PTR most likely after 10.2.6 release because 10.2.6 is very close. How do we know it's close? Well, first of all, because of all the dungeon announcements. Since it's not 100% confirmed that 10.2.6 will release this reset, next reset, 2 resets from now, we don't know exactly when. We know it's going to be way quicker because the Season 4 has already been, well, it's been announced, right? Okay, listen. There was a big blue post a couple of days ago talking about all of the dungeon changes for the Season 4. And I'm going to quote them because the way they think about the dungeons is important, so you kind of know what to expect from the dungeons, doing Mythic Zeros, Heroics, and Mythic Plus as well, because most likely the actual fine-tuning of them will change as the season progresses. So, just to quote them, they said, no timer like the present, which addressing the Mythic Plus timers is definitely a video on its own, but we're gonna go into it. Season 4 changes will apply to all 8 of the Dragonflight dungeons. This is the first sentence in the post, and if this doesn't confirm the dungeon pool in Mythic Plus in Season 4 being all the Dragonflight dungeons with the exception of Dawn of the Infinite, I don't know what will, because they're not addressing all the Dragonflight dungeons with no ulterior motive. This is the dungeon pool in Season 4. They don't have enough manpower to work on content that is not going to provide any source of relevancy for the entirety of Season 4 as War Within is coming out. So the dungeons that we'll have are the Dragonflight dungeons, which is, yes, I called it, I wished for it for over a year now. I'm glad that they're bringing back Knock It Offensive, boys, and Algathar Academy. I know some of you don't like it, but listen, you're gonna have to deal with it now. Moving on. As a part of these adjustments, we have a few goals in mind. Very important. Recalibrate core difficulties to align with seasonal player experience and progression. This is pretty vague, so I'm not gonna unpack this now, but we're gonna get to it later. Serve the community who enjoys dungeon content but feels that Mythic Plus content isn't for them due to the pressure of taking part. This is way bigger than you think, hopefully, but it is way bigger because this means that dungeons are going to be relevant outside of Mythic Plus more, and this is something that a lot of people have been asking for, something that oddly enough people that don't enjoy Mythic Plus will definitely crave, and there aren't that many people that don't enjoy Mythic Plus considering that pretty much everybody's playing Mythic Plus at this time. Last thing, create a better environment in Mythic dungeons to prepare more players to take part in Mythic Plus. So they're kind of trying to, judging from this, adjust the dungeon scene. I want to say normal, heroic, and Mythic 0, but normal is, we're gonna get to it, so that people can do Mythic Plus, but also feel like heroics and Mythic Zeros are not useless. One of the most notable changes players can look forward to is the removal of the timer for Mythic Keystone dungeons for what are currently 0s and 10s. This is a lot of rewording to kind of make you feel like you're getting something that you're not actually getting, right? We're gonna get to it. So just take this with a grain of salt. Players can run through these dungeons at their own pace without the need to watch the clock while still honing their skills. Here's a look at the change for each difficulty. Now, normal has nothing changed. Normal dungeons are going to be normal dungeons. Whatever happens, happens. It's a normal dungeon. Heroics, though, the tuning and rewards of this difficulty are increased to be equivalent to a baseline mythic dungeon in the current system. So whatever the difficulty is in a mythic 0 dungeon that you go into now is going to be the heroic level next season. As such, mythic difficulty changes and mechanics will not be present in this difficulty because that's heroic. I don't know why they're saying all of these things. It's so weird. We know that's not the case for heroic. So all of this, in the grand scheme of things, you can just think of just the difficulty is scaled up because also, and we'll get to it later, the eye levels will be bumped up as well. So it's same thing that happened in Season 4 in Shadowlands. They're just very fancy with how they say things so as to not create confusion, because the confusion could be created because the way that they word these things. So it's kind of like they're creating a problem and a solution for that problem at the same time, so actually nothing really changes. This remains a queuable experience. Of course, it's heroic dungeons. Come on, man. Who asks these questions that they need to be iterated on? But let's say we're moving forward. Now, for Mythic, which is what we call Mythic Zeros, normal Mythic dungeons, the tuning and rewards for this difficulty are increased to the equivalent of a +10 dungeon with affixes in the current system. There are no timers. Because it's a Mythic Zero, of course there are no timers, affixes, or limitations on changing specializations or talents while in the dungeon. The goal is to create a mega dungeon-like difficulty for this experience. Difficulty should present a meaningful challenge and provide commensurate rewards without the pressure of the current Mythic Plus system. Mythic Zero is still on a weekly lockout under this model. So you can look at all of this and think it's way fancier than it is. What they're doing is just increasing the difficulty of the Mythic Zero because every season this is true. This happens every season, but the rewards and the eye level will also increase. So I don't know where the balance is if overall, in the grand scheme of things, Mythic Zero is going to be more difficult. It's not, because sure, it rewards better eye levels. It also is harder to do so that players feel good about doing it and completing it. But so is everything else, and the eye level bump is going to be present across the board, because probably they're thinking that Season 4 is not a real season, and people might think that Season 4 is not a real season, but it is a real season. You just don't get new content, but eye level increases as with every season, dungeons get harder as with every other season, so it's not necessarily new. You might read this and think of that, oh my god, they're doing new things, but they're not. Mythic Plus. The Mythic Plus system will have rewards up to level 10, with +2 starting from what would regularly be a +11 in the current Mythic Plus system. So in past seasons, we usually had about a 3 to 5 key level bumps in difficulty, like a +10 in Season 3 would have been equivalent to a +13, 15 in Season 2 or something like that, right? A +5 should be as hard as a +15, and a +10 should be as hard as a +20 in Mythic Plus system. So they're increasing the difficulty of the dungeon. You can look at this and say, oh, it's 10 key levels. Sure, that's a number, but once again, the rewards are also increased. Affixes would slot in at 2, 5, and 10, 2 being for the weekly affix Fortified Tyrannical, 5 for the Entangling Incorporeal, etc., and 10 for the other ones. This is a definitely change, because usually the secondary affixes, the not Fortified and Tyrannical ones, would come at a +7 and then a +14, but now they're bumped down to a +5 and a +10. However, 5s are harder, 10s are harder, so at the end of the day, it's just juggling a lot of balls for almost the same result, but because there are more of them now, you think that's something different. This is kind of what it is. This is the first part of it, though. Dungeon rating should be equivalent to what they represent in the current system. There should be a smaller range of keystone levels to find groups for, and more meaningful progression between each level, because they increase probably the difficulty between each level, since dungeons scale differently and they don't scale linearly, they scale, I don't know, exponentially, I don't know, but that's part of it. Now, this is just them saying with very fancy word that the numbers are just going higher in Season 4 because that's what happens with every season. Of course, just to clarify for anybody that's not been in the loop, Dragonflight Season 4 will revisit Dragonflight's dungeons and raids along with the outdoor content featuring update rewards and a few new twists. This is, again, the Fated Season. I think they're just iterating this for people who don't know what the Fated Season is. Now, first of all, what this confirms is that what we probably knew from every season, things get harder, you get more loot. In addition to all of the difficulty increase, everything will reward higher eye level. As with all new seasons, there has to be some kind of progression in terms of eye level. Now, Mythic Amir-Drisil, the current raid, will still remain as doable in Season 4 as Sepulchre was for Shadowlands as well, with the same rewards, meaning for 89 item level. Now we're going to have also fated raids, which are basically all the Dragonflight raids, Amir-Drisil as well, with the fated tag on them. Think of them as how Mythic Plus dungeons add the spin to the normal Mythic dungeons. These will reward higher eye level, about a 39 eye level boost, so all the way up to Mythic Amir-Drisil rewarding 528 item level rewards for their content. Obviously, Heroic raid will do up to 515 and trickles down to all the dungeons. Mythic 0 will reward 493, Mythic plus 10 Keystones will reward 509, and so on and so forth. And we have a comprehensive table that you can probably look at to see exactly what's going on here and what eye levels to expect. Like, all of these numbers are fine, they might change, they might not, but what you have to take away from this is that it doesn't really change much. It's just bumping up all the difficulties and eye levels. Now, there might be a different correlation between how hard a dungeon is versus how much eye level it rewards. That can only be really seen after about a month of actually playing the season to figure out exactly, does it feel better to do a plus 10 now than a plus 10 in the past? That's besides the point. But what's interesting is that they are actively thinking about the fact that dungeons outside of the Mythic Plus dungeon pool are not as rewarding or relevant as well. And this is the big takeaway, and this is very important. I don't know what this means for the future, but what it sounds like it could mean is that other progression style in the endgame will be relevant outside of Mythic Plus. Dungeons will be more relevant in the future. Hopefully, this is what they're intending, especially that they've recognized that the Mega Dungeon is satisfying. Whenever Dawn of the Infinites came out in 10.1.5, it was very fun to do. It was not a Mythic Plus. It rewarded higher eye level than a normal Mythic Dungeon, competitive with Mythic Plus content. Also, if you did the No Deathless run and got the trinkets at the end, you would get like really big eye level trinkets, like the Cheat Death trinket from Iridicron was going to be really good, and pushed people that were pushing Mythic Plus keys to also do normal Mythic dungeons. This could mean an evolution in Mythic dungeons in the future, where Mythic Zeros, normal Mythic dungeons, or whatever you want to call it, even Heroic dungeons will become way more relevant and provide way more power to people, and maybe incentivize people who are not that keen at pushing their Mythic Plus score and rating and having to do with the timers and affixes and all of that, push them to also do dungeons. Now, the new Fated raid system is going to be really fun. The raids are really fun, and if you want to know what the current raid situation is, you can look at the raid DPS meta for range and see exactly how everybody's doing in the raid right now in terms of their overall score, and see if one of these specs is going to be right for you in the next season.